Hey, today we have a special guest with us today, and we're going to have fun talking about archery as we always do on the channel here. And remember, we can watch this on the my YouTube channel on Learn to Fix It Yourself, as well as we go live in the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. So go out there and join, and you can talk to us, as well as you can listen to the audible. I can't talk today. uh, on Spotify as well as on Audible. You can listen to it there. So let's get the show started. My name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be host today on Archery Talk 101. And we have Eyad on the line with us today. And we're going to have some fun talking about archery. And Eyad, how about if you introduce yourself and tell our audience something about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Eyad Yehyawi. I'm an optometrist and author here in Iowa. An avid archer. I've been doing it since I was a teenager, the last 30 some years, and kind of self-taught. Grew up in Iowa. Came from a family that really didn't hunt, and from my earliest years, I just remember having a passion for it. And of course, this was long before social media and videos, so did a lot of reading and a lot of trial and error, and it's just always been a passion of mine since I've been really young, the outdoors and especially archery. So
So what got you started in archery other
you
than you
know,
passion for it? Is there something that made you
it's a great
start?
yeah, it's a great question. When I was young, like I said, my parents didn't hunt, and so when I was really young, 5, 6 years old, I always remember wanting to be outside and asked my dad to take me on fishing trips and walk through the woods. And then as I got a little older, around 10 or 11, I started, growing up in Iowa, we have a lot of opportunity to hunt, and seeing a lot of my friends do things like pheasant hunt and squirrel hunt and things of that nature. And then my friend Roger Whitaker, who was actually at the hunter safety meeting when I finally talked my father into letting me go, he was there and he said, "Hey," told my father, "Would you mind if he came and squirrel hunted with a small game?" And my dad said, "Sure, no problem." And we went squirrel hunting. This was back in 1991, a few times that fall, and really enjoyed it, just being out there and getting my feet wet in the outdoors. And one day we decided to pack up early and go back to the car. And I remember being disappointed, thinking, "Gosh, why are we going back so early? It's early." And him and his son Andy said, "Well, we're going to practice. We're going to practice our archery. We got deer season starting." And I saw deer season. I thought that was only with guns. And I'd heard of people doing shotgun hunts in Iowa. And I watched Andy and Roger shoot that night with their compound, and Roger had a recurve, and I was just mesmerized by it. I just remember seeing those fletchings zip through the air, and it was calm, and much like your screen here, the sun was setting, and it was kind of that amber, the arrows against the amber, sunset. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing I've seen." And so I got home and I begged my parents, I was like, "I gotta get a bow, I gotta get a bow." And they're like, "Slow down, slow down. You just started this thing." And that Christmas, my mom and dad surprised me with a bow that the draw length was way too long and the arrows were way too long. But that's how I kind of got started. I had a mentor take me under my wing and just kind of show me by experience, and I just kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's nice when you get to connect in with somebody that gets you started, and that's a lot of it that's hard to do if you don't have anybody that does it, and trying to find somebody that helps you out. And
Absolutely. In fact, every chance I get back home, it's interesting. And it doesn't always have to be hunting. It's whether it's baseball or other things I see kids talk about, especially my two boys. I have two young boys. When they're interested in something, I try to expose them to it, and they may not always take to it, but I always think back on those archery days, and if Roger had not taken me or said, "Hey, we're going to take Eyad home first, and then we'll go back and practice alone," I never would have seen that, and I may never be where I am today as far as my love for archery. So I think it's important to really key in and listen to young people, young children when they're interested in something, because you never know what seed will be planted.
yeah, and kids will have a lot of energy. They want to go do something, and then it's like, no, calm down. It's like, no, don't calm down. Be obsessed. Do it some more. Do it some more.
Well said. Isn't that the truth? Especially any father or mother would, kind of echo what you just said. Like, you want them to chill out and calm down, but then you're like, "No, I want you to be out there and experiencing life." So, you're definitely right in saying that.
Well, and I it's not completely my thing here. I've been listening to Grant Cardone's "Be Obsessed or Be Average." I listened to on
Right,
Audible, and
right,
he
right.
was telling about, when as a kid he was obsessed, and then tried to stifle it, and then he got into other things. He got obsessed about other things, bad things,
That's right.
and then he finally turned around, and now it's like he's obsessed with, good stuff. It's like, what's going on? And, say that's kind of something that's, you know, that we need to realize in kids. They have all this energy, and now then in school, they, instead of trying to keep them entertained, they want to drug them up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Find
challenging
something for
too.
the do.
Yeah, they want to calm down. So it's funny. My kids we were watching football this weekend, and they, we're snowed in here like we were talking about before the podcast, and they had the soccer ball, and it wasn't a full soccer ball, it was just a little lighter, and they were kicking it back and forth in the living room, and the ball's going past me and it hits the wall, and Christmas ornaments are falling off the tree, and I remember thinking like, slow down, let's watch the game, and then part of me is like, no, let them be kids, let them get out there and do their thing because it's not going to be long before they're not going to be around or not want to do those things. So
Right.
you're absolutely right. You want them to be kids and you want to keep them safe, but whatever they're doing now, it won't be long before they're doing something else. So we might as well enjoy it and embrace it while we can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the definitely, um, something that you need to look at in kids. They say a lot of them have ADD. Well, it's
Yeah.
because they're bored,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
For sure.
and then you take the same kid and sit to play for hours, play video games.
Yeah.
He just
Yeah.
don't have a desire. What his focus is just not in it. And yeah,
Yeah. We didn't have any of those things. Of course, we had some video games back in the 90s, but, no phones and things like that. So we were always outside. We were, chasing either playing sports or in the timber. And like I said, my mom and dad weren't into the outdoors, but every chance they had, they would take me and let me fish. Or my mom used to take me when I was really little. I loved, get out there and chasing butterflies or looking for, walking through the woods. And she would just take me and kind of drop me off and watch me from a distance and then call me back in a couple hours. So yeah, we're
yeah,
certainly not doing as much of that these days. And so every chance we get, we try to get our kids out there and experience. Just the other day, my son, just last night, actually, he's like, I want to do snowshoes. Like, I've never worn a snowshoe in my life. And my youngest son is 8. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look into it this weekend. And I've got a buddy at the Lynn County Conservation that just did a snowshoe workshop. So those are the little things they say. And I could have very easily said, oh, okay, sounds great, But I listened to what he said, and I told my wife before we went to bed that night. I said, hey, let's try to get him in some snowshoes here before the snow melts because he might not want to do that again. And then the rest of his life, he may never step in a snowshoe or have that opportunity. So, yeah, keening, focusing on what they say and acting on it for our children, I think is important to get them involved, whether it's hunting or snowshoes or anything.
yeah, that's um, and then you have fun doing them.
Oh,
You find us like, you kid gets started something and then they lose interest, and now you're hooked on it.
yeah, you learn too. Like, I have no idea what it would be like to walk in a snowshoe, and I thought, what an opportunity for me to to learn that skill set too. And there's so many things out there we don't understand or know because we just don't experience them. So that's what we're going to try to do this weekend: find some snowshoes and hopefully not freeze to death out there.
Yeah, that's well, it should be not too bad, but next week's going to be up warm enough. It's going to
I know
be
it's going to be a
slushy.
little
Yeah,
slushy
you
and a
only got
little
there now when it's still hard.
it'll be t-shirt weather next week. So
Yeah, yeah, be t-shirt weather. Before we started the podcast, was talking about how, it's summertime, it gets down to 60, we're putting on coats, and then in the winter time when it's, 0, and when it warms up to 25, 30, we're out there in t-shirts, and up to
right.
40, it's like, hey, we're on short pants and t-shirts.
It's true how
Yeah.
well we adapt to things and it's just like anything. But yeah, you're right. When it's 30 next week, I don't think I'll probably have a little sweatshirt on if anything. So, but I'll take it. I'll take it. We're that
Yeah.
much closer to spring.
Yeah, that's going to be nice. We got the same weather here,
Yes.
because we're just not too far away. You're in Iowa. Whereabouts in Iowa are you?
East Central Iowa.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, East
Cedar
Central.
Rapids. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
about Cedar Rapids. Yeah,
Yeah. Just North Iowa City.
yeah.
So
You're a
about
little
the
ways
same.
away, but still.
Yeah. About the same though. About the same. I've hunted Nebraska quite a bit, not so much in the last 4 or 5 years, but I think there was about a 10 or 11 year stretch. I'd come over every spring and turkey hunt. In that area. And I love Nebraska, so it's got a lot of good memories there from the springs.
Yeah, we got a good crop of turkeys and deer now and everything else. I did see I looked on their website, and the deer kill is down
Yeah.
this year from last year.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what the reason is, but it wasn't as good as it was the year before, and
Yeah, it seems very cyclical. I know that there's been some challenges in the nation with turkey populations, and I know we've seen that in Iowa some and down south. And I want to say even Nebraska might have reduced their or eliminated their fall season, um, coming up or gone back to draw because of the bird numbers being down. So, hopefully we can right the ship and
Yeah.
get those bird numbers back like they were in the 90s and the 2000s.
Well, I've got a flock of about 3 dozen that hang around
Wow, that's
about a
awesome.
mile from where I'm at. And I have
Yeah.
permission to cross the river or cross the road on the highway to hunt, but I just got to figure out when they're going to be there and get out there for turkey season, try and call them.
Yeah, it's some farmers I talk to just they're covered up in turkeys and like, oh my gosh, there's too many, and others like I haven't seen them. I haven't seen a bird strutting in my fields for years when they used to see 4 or 5. So it's definitely something we're trying to figure out, and hopefully we can get back to those as they say glory years when there was it wasn't anything to hear 6 or 8 gobblers here in Iowa, and maybe the last 4 or 5 years I've heard 1 or 2 sometimes on some properties. So um, yeah, hopefully it gets better. It gets better and better springs, better weather, and better numbers.
Yeah, I know the other property we have here that I hunt, there's about a half a dozen turkeys on that one. But there's a lot of raccoons and
Yeah.
coyotes, and there is a little covey of quail that's over there. Um, you know, we need to reduce the raccoon and coyotes, because the raccoons they're going to eat lots of eggs.
Yes,
So,
I've heard that. I've heard that, and some biologists. I wish I could remember his name. He has awesome posts on Instagram. He's a turkey biologist from Georgia, I believe, and had really insightful posts about turkey populations and predators. And I believe he had a podcast about how the great horned owls were really one of the top predators they were finding in their studies that were taking mature gobblers. So I was blown away by that. I mean, we've had a couple great horned owls here that were injured that we helped, kind of get back on the road, or we called the Raptor Center. And when you see one of those up close and personal, you realize how they could take down a turkey with those talons and coming in full speed at daybreak. Fascinating research he's doing. So I wish I could remember his name, but yeah, the raccoons and the possums and surely the horned owls and the weather, the habitat, it's cumulative, right? As far as the effect on the numbers. So
yeah, yeah, we just got to do something that, help them out. And because we don't need hundreds of raccoons and coyotes running around because the deer and the turkeys and quail are not going to show up and pheasants. I haven't seen a pheasant in a long time. And then, so yesterday I was driving in, here's a pheasant running the side of the road. I hadn't seen one in a long
you're
time.
like, whoa, rooster. Yeah. Same
Yeah,
thing here. We're seeing more lately than we have in a long time in Iowa here. And I know there was a 10-year stretch where that was just like that. If you saw one, you almost want to stop your car and take a picture because they were becoming so rare, and they're making a little bit of a comeback. So that's really nice to see.
well, it kind of almost seems like as the turkey population the pheasant goes down.
I've heard that. I haven't pheasant hunted in years. I used to do a lot of that in the 90s, but as I got more into archery and kind of fell in love with that and raising a family and working full time, you only have so much time. But I guess, yeah, there's one property that has a little bit of both, but not high numbers of either. So, but that might be true. Yeah, now that I think about it.
I know when I was younger, I used to do a lot of pheasant hunting, and a lot of places I'm hunting now are just all loaded with houses.
I know.
When we go
I
out
know.
and
Same
drive all
here.
over, and
Same here.
my
Yeah.
my uncle lived over in Iowa, and we go over by Missouri Valley, and we'd hunt pheasant over there, and it was amazing how he could see. We'd going down the road 60 miles an hour, and he said, "There's one." Like,
Right.
wait a minute. I can't see past the trees because I hadn't learned how to see through the trees. Because all
Right.
I see is rows of trees, and he's picking up pheasants, and it's like,
Isn't that amazing when
and he's
somebody has such
driving.
a trained eye,
Yeah,
onto some people out west that same thing, when we're spotting and with the scope and stuff, the things they've seen, it's amazing to me how they're able to, pick up an antler flash or a bedded mule deer or a moose or things like that. So yeah, there's some very, very skilled outdoorsmen out there.
yeah. And as I got older and did a little bit more, then I learned how to see them. And
Mm,
over in Iowa you could do that, but in Nebraska you can't road hunt,
right,
so you can't stop alongside the road and shoot one.
right.
And there's been times of going out and I knew the guy I was out with, he would have stopped that. I seen much, I just didn't say nothing. It's like I don't want to get out and shoot there.
Right.
We're gonna go to the field. And
Right.
And now, as I get older, as I don't want to walk for the pheasants, I'd rather go climb in a tree stand and wait for the deer to come in because
Right.
I
Everything
get one deer,
changes,
it's a
right?
whole lot more meat than three pheasants.
Yeah, I remember I used to be really, really passionate about pheasant hunting, and I love watching them and hearing about the hunts. A lot of the patients I see up here are pheasant hunters, and some are diehard pheasant hunters like we are in archery, and love hearing their stories. And they've had a good year. They've taken a lot of roosters this year. So, well, what a beautiful bird and a privilege to hunt for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I used to do a lot. My cousin would take me out um and do it a lot. As he was about my mom's age. They were just like a little bit apart. And he's the one I went hunting with all the time. And I think I went hunting one time with my dad. The rest was all with my cousin there, and um, that was a lot of hunting, a lot of walking. I can remember walking through fields that when you step, you're up to your hips in snow, and then you climb up and step down, and climb up and step down. It's like each step is a challenge just to get to the next step. And snowshoes would have been great then.
I know, right? Speaking of snowshoes, yeah, I remember walking through cornfields that weren't harvested yet on opening day of pheasant season. By noon, they were, get up to 60 degrees and they turned into a muddy mess. And, your rubber boots were covered with 2 inches of mud and hard to walk. And, the blades were cutting your face and it was hot. And so whether you're walking through snow or, pheasant hunting can be pretty challenging. But like you said, it's surely enjoy sitting in a tree stand more now these days than walking the fields.
Yeah, as we get older, our knees don't cooperate so much. You know,
Yeah,
we're just
knees,
not in the
hips.
shape we used to be in. So
That's right. Hey, at least we got to do it once, though, right?
yeah, yeah. Do when you're young, just every season you're in, you're gonna do something different, and
That's right.
and you're gonna
That's
pick up
right.
something different here in the last well, it's going on 3 years now. I've been doing the podcast, and it's a lot of fun talking archers all over the world.
Yeah,
Um,
it's got to be enjoyable to to talk, share stories, and get their experiences. And yeah, it's really been a nice thing. Like I said, we didn't have these things when I was younger, and hear other people's point of view. You learn so much from podcasts and tips and tricks and experiences, and has really expanded our knowledge base on archery. At least it has mine for sure. So.
Yeah, and every time I talk to somebody, on the podcast, I'm learning something and they're learning something, and
Mhm.
hopefully our listeners are learning something on top of it. And that's kind of why I called it Arch Talk 101, because we're
Mhm.
here to teach you the basics and intermediate and advanced as well. We can help you no matter what level you're at, but um it's just so much fun teaching new archers to shoot. And it's really really nice when you have somebody that was in with somebody else wanted to shoot a bow. They're looking for buying a bow, and you say to them, it's like, hey, you want to try one? Oh no. Just try one shot.
You're
One
right.
shot turned to, ooh, this is fun. Can I shoot again? Well, of course you can shoot it
Exactly.
again.
Exactly. Just, giving them the opportunity to experience it. There's a young man who, a former employee where I worked and not here anymore, a great kid, wanted to get involved with archery and reached out. And ironically, just this month, we're scheduled to kind of meet at the archery range and get him, some experience with archery. And that's how it starts. You get one new archer and two new archers in, because if we don't, you know, um, share our knowledge and or experiences and allow people to enjoy it too, it's going to go away. So that's been really fun for me to see my kids, shoot. Sometimes they're more interested than others, but I think, whenever they're ready to experience it, I'm there, like, hey, I want to go shoot today. I think that's important rather than dragging them out there and, doing something they might not enjoy. So, yeah, but any opportunity that you get a new archer to get out on the range and show them a few things, I think you're right. Let me shoot another arrow, let me draw another bow. And they're all of a sudden they're seeing that arrow hit close to where they were aiming and they can't believe it. And that's kind of how it started for me. Really perplexed by how complicated it was at first, and then all of a sudden the consistency, and it's still fascinating to me to put an arrow, anywhere close to a quarter size shape at, however many yards you're shooting. It's remarkable that there's equipment and that we can do that with. So yeah, it's a beautiful sport.
Yeah, there's just so much you can do no matter what you want to do. Do you want to just shoot in your backyard?
Right.
You want to shoot a recurve, a compound, a longbow, or any of the other uh, myriad of styles of bows. You just want to shoot for fun in your backyard. Hey, go for it.
Right.
You want to you now you maybe you want to just shoot target. Don't compete, just shoot at targets, Yeah, and then maybe you want to get in a league and start shooting more competitive. You want to do in targets. Maybe you want to do 3D shoots. Maybe you want to go in Olympic style. And
That's
there's
right.
so many options. Um, maybe you say, okay, let me see how far I can shoot. And so now you're practicing, those 100-yard shots. And I wouldn't recommend starting with 100-yard shots. And then as you get older, you can't see that far. So
Right. There's a lot of truth there. It's
like
like,
it's all a big blur out there. I don't know what I'm hitting because I'm just shoot. It's like,
but it's
okay,
true.
50, 100 yards. There you go.
Yeah, it sounds cool until you get out there and you're like, boy, I can barely see the target. But yeah, there's so many ways to practice and so many. You don't have to bow hunt. You don't have to shoot 3D. You don't have to shoot spots. You can shoot when you want. But it's a great way to stay physically fit, with your shoulders and so much more physical than other things. And it really challenges you. I don't think we ever truly master it, right? I mean, as soon as we think we've mastered it, it humbles us. It challenges us, um, not only our physical capabilities, but trying to tune a new piece of equipment. So to me, that's the other thing that's always been enjoyable is that you improve and improve and improve, and then it knocks you back. And then you got to, learn something else and improve, 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 and it knocks you back. So, and I think that's probably the big, as long as I'm able, God gives me the ability to do it. I think that'll never change. I'll continue to try to master it, but I don't think I'll ever will. So that's what I love about it.
Well, that's why you do it. So you just keep getting better and better. And if you're
Yep.
not getting better and better, well, maybe you need to get a coach.
That's right.
You can only go so far by yourself. You need somebody to look and see what you're doing and coach you.
That's right. There's a lot of I've had a couple coaches through the years that have really opened my eyes to certain things I was doing because we're blind to a lot of things we do. And it's not only archery, right? Whether it's nutrition or working out or business, and somebody who's a third party with an objective view can say, hey, you're shooting here, but the enemy of great can be good, and let's get you to shoot better. And it's hard to change, right? I mean, you get set in
Yeah.
your ways. You like a release, you like a certain style, but if it can make you better, then a coach can be someone that can bring that out in you if you give them the opportunity.
Yeah. And when you start talking to archers, there are some that their form is terrible. They're not drooping. They just don't, but yet they're not open to be coached. They're
No,
not willing
exactly.
to change.
That's
And
it. That's right.
I get, working in that industry for many years, I got really quick at, I talked to somebody for 3 or 4 minutes and no, I don't say nothing because I already told that they have this attitude that they're not going to change. They're doing it right. I can't tell them what they're doing. And
Right.
like, okay, I don't care
Right.
if you don't want to get better. And then you get some that's like, what's going on? I can't figure out what's going on. It's like, well, try this, try this, try this. And
Right.
the next thing you know, I've done it many times, taking somebody that's shooting like 6-inch groups at 20 yards. And I had one guy, or one is shooting way too long to draw like bow, so I fixed that. But it was about 45 minutes I spent with him, and now he was shooting 1-inch groups
That's awesome. That's
from
and
six
that's
to 1 inch.
yeah. When he and like you said, draw length. In my opinion, draw length is everything as far as like your consistency and even
Oh
an
yeah,
eighth of an inch off for me just drives me crazy. It really destroys my consistency and my comfort and but again, if you're not familiar with that, you could continue shooting. When I first started, as I mentioned, I got a bow that was 2 or 3 inches too long and kept hitting my arm. And, I had fishtailing arrows and inconsistent, but I was just getting started. So just simply drawing the bow was good enough. But as you get older, you getting a draw board and measuring to an eighth of an inch or 16th of an inch, and your total draw length is huge for me. It sounds like it is for you too, as far as
yeah,
draw length and consistency and accuracy. So yeah, I agree with you. It can matter, but you got to be open to change. If someone doesn't want to change in anything in life, you're going to be hard pressed to get them there unless they're open to it and say, hey, what do you think of this, or how do you think I could improve that? And um, somebody told me once, you'll never change someone's opinion with facts, but you might a story. And so
yeah,
sometimes say, sharing a story with somebody about how a draw length that was too long cost me a buck of a lifetime, or I remember I missed a 200-inch deer November 8th, 2000. I could tell you exact date and time because I bought a new mask at Cabela's. It was temperature much like this, a little warmer. It was about 8 degrees for November. It was just brutal. And I remember wearing this beautiful face mask from Cabela's, brand new. It was warm, and I had it on. I'd never shot with it. And this buck came in, and I went to draw. And as I drew, the face mask turned, and I couldn't see my peep through my left eye. And I was trying to maneuver it with my chin and my tongue, and I finally could get it clear. And by that point, he had started to move, and I shot and just grazed him. And I never forgot that. And I never, ever, ever have shot or hunted again with a piece of equipment that I wasn't very familiar with. Like I would not go with a new jacket or new face mask or new anything because of that really gut wrenching experience. And I have yet to see a deer that big again, and that was 24 years ago. And
Yeah.
so, but again, that was a story. If someone had said, "Oh, this face mask is better because," and give me the facts of it, I say, "Well, I want that one." But sharing a story of a lost deer of that size, people listen, and then they're like, "Man, I don't want that to happen to me." And so, yeah, so I think that's resonate with me when people share stories and books too, like or podcasts. You hear a story of someone's success or failure, you tend to remember it more than if someone gives you just straight facts. So, in any case, that's helped me. So,
Well, I say facts tell, but stories sell.
that's right.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good. I've not heard
anybody
that one
that's
in a while, but you're right too. That's another good cliche. I like that. I like it.
yeah, anybody that's done any sailing or sales or anything along that line, where you're promoting yourself for you can tell them all the facts you want. Well, yeah, you know,
Right, and they'll
they
be like,
like
"Uh-huh."
they like to
There's
use the
nodding and
story
nodding and
you're looking for a drill and they tell you all the features of the drill. It's like, I just want a hole.
right.
I don't
That's
care
right.
what that. Yeah, will it
Yeah,
drill a hole? Yeah,
that's
it'll drill a
right.
perfect hole for you. Okay, so you know,
You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it takes time to, excuse me, come to that conclusion and come to that realization. But when you do, you're absolutely right. Stories and simplicity sometimes are the best thing you can do to get someone to come your way. So,
and we have a lot of stories out here about different things that you'll learn and stuff. And I was talking about cleaning deer on one of them, and I'd mentioned, how they clean them, they just grab it and kind of just rip them off. They're going to the car, pull them off, and it's like we discovered one time by mistake, accident. We didn't know the deer was really dirty and stuff, and we didn't want to haul it in the garage to hose it up, so we hosed it all down. We just soaked it all down, got everything all hosed down. That hide just peeled right off.
really,
Yeah, and I was
I,
like, because there's something about soaking that hide. It soaks through, so it loosens the membrane. It's kind of wet in there.
mhm. Uh-huh.
It's how normally the membrane between the meat and the
Yep,
hide, and
sure.
that is really hard. Soak it and it becomes soft and just kind of it gets waterlogged and it just comes right off.
That's interesting. I've never heard that. I'll talk to my buddy who does a little, excuse me, a lot of his own processing, a lot for his buddies, and I'll have to touch base with him on that. That's fascinating. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and we just by accident. It was just we just wanted to clean it up and it just come off. So after that, we hosed down everyone before we cleaned them. Because now at least a little more water and stuff wherever you're hanging it because it's
Sure,
soaking wet. But
sure.
it comes off so much easier.
Interesting. Well, give that some thought. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you learned something. And
There
we
you
talked
go.
about that on one other one. And the guy was talking, I told him that, and he's like, "Oh, I never heard of that. We used to just, take a tennis ball or something and just pull it down and
Mhm.
work on it." And like, you're working too hard, dude. Just soak the hide.
Let me show you this way. Yeah. Yeah. And how many other things are out there that we haven't discovered yet that we will before we're done. And you look back, and go, gosh, I wish I'd known that, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But that's the way of life, right? You just learn as you go and kind of learn things and always open to new ideas and new methods.
Yeah. And then, shot placement is one of those things that, that can be critical. And if all you do is shoot 3D, where you aim on a 3D target is not where you aim on a live animal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I tell a lot of people, once again, it's interesting you bring that up because, sometimes this year, especially, I had an opportunity to track a lot of deer. I was able to harvest my deer early and then it seems like for 3 consecutive weekends, I had buddies call and say, "Hey, I shot this nice buck. I did this, I did that." And I was able to kind of do different. And as we would examine the deer or look at anatomy on the one we lost, unfortunately, if someone's not open to changing their shot placement, then they'll continue to shoot too far back. The void is something they talk about still, which, is a whole different conversation. But you're absolutely right. And the turkey too, like turkey season's now closer than deer season was.
Right.
And same principle, the 3D target on a deer or a turkey is so much different than how we'll, I'm doing a seminar in a couple weeks on that. And every time I get done with that seminar, people are like, wow, I had no idea I'm supposed to shoot them there. I've always shot them at where the 3D is. And you're absolutely right. Looking at the anatomy and how it sets up is critical because it can really change things. You can, have a really short, sweet blood trail, or it can have you scratching your head thinking my broadhead didn't work or my
Yeah.
arrow failed me. And it's not that. It's just, anatomy is anatomy. And, you put it in the right place, they're not going to go very far. So,
Well, and that's where the bigger broadheads, the turkey ones that you just shoot the neck.
yeah.
You know, and when you think about how big is the neck,
Uh-huh.
how big is the heart and the lungs?
Right.
You know,
Right.
what size of a quarter maybe is
About
a
a quarter. Yeah. I've
yeah,
taken
you
it.
got a
Yeah.
quarter size target to hit the heart, and the
Yep.
lung probably maybe a silver dollar size.
Yep. That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
the neck is at least the silver dollar size.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like a 16-ounce Coke can, 16-ounce Coke bottle.
Yeah,
Sometimes and I've used both. I use big mechanicals and the headhunters, whether it's the guillotine or um, Montex version, things like that. But to practice sometimes I'll hang, excuse me, used Diet Coke can, it's about, 16 ounces. And
right.
also if you hang it on a rope, it has a tendency to, even though when you hold it still, it's not quite still. So it's kind of,
Yeah,
even indoors, it's kind of drifting a little bit. And that's just as they come in, that head is constantly, looking and walking. And so I've
yeah,
used those with pretty good success, but you're right. It's a way, way, way bigger target. And sometimes, it's interesting though, sometimes, when I go back to the mechanicals, I find like their body is much more still than their neck is when they come into the decoys and they're, kind of, boxing them in and out, in and out. And whereas their spine and their vitals are pretty still. So I kind of go back and forth between those two. And often, sometimes it depends on where I'm hunting. Here in Cedar Rapids, we had a huge storm 3 years ago called the derecho, and it just wiped out timbers, throughout the whole area. And it's just a jungle. And so some of those areas that I'll hunt this spring, the headhunters are very favorable because if you shoot one and they usually drop where they're supposed to, and if you miss, you miss. Whereas the mechanicals, as sometimes you can, I can feel a whole podcast of turkeys I've chased through the woods through the years, and blood trailed them, and but if they get and the properties I've had success with are big open timbers with certain areas that are brushy, but now in this area up here where everything is a brush pile, they are masters of deception, getting away just like a rooster pheasant. Like how well they can hide. A 25-pound bird can just disappear. It's fascinating to me, but you're right on the kill zone on the head neck on turkeys compared to their silver dollar lungs and quarter heart, so yeah, but those are things you got to think about. And when I first started turkey hunting with bow, you see this big, looks like a trash bag coming in, and you're like, oh, I just got to put the arrow anywhere on this animal. It's not true. If you don't hit them, as in that sweet spot, that's a lost turkey. So
yeah,
yeah, shot placement's so critical in archery, no matter what broadhead you shoot or bow. That's probably the most important thing. Is we talked about draw length for accuracy, and then shot placement probably for harvest rate. You shoot them where you're supposed to, you're going to get that animal every time.
yeah. And after all, we're out there to make a clean, the cleanest and quickest
Yes,
kill as we can.
exactly,
And wounding them just means that if we recover them, we're lucky.
exactly. And it's a terrible feeling for the archer. It's a terrible look for the sport. Um, it's not good for anybody. So, um, yeah, I remember there was he had to be 170-inch whitetail. This is October. I don't know why I remember this date, 17th or 18th of 2020. And he came in and he was quartering to me very severely. I'll never forget this. I never saw him again that season. And I came to full draw on him and I had the pin buried, right between the shoulder blade and the brisket, and kept waiting and waiting for him to turn, and he never would. And I never took that shot. Now I know there's some archers that really are big on the frontal shot and sliding it in there, but after 30 years of doing it, I've seen that the odds weren't in my favor in that
No,
situation. And I let it go. I never even dropped the string because I was able to think ahead of what would happen, not so much in that moment of this giant deer and he's at 15, 20 yards and, seeing, all these great things that would come with it, taking a deer like that. I thought ahead, like, okay, even if that arrow goes where I want it to go, there's a very good chance I'll only get one lung, and I'm gonna spending the rest of the winter and spring either looking for them or feeling terrible about it. And I
Right.
never regretted that decision. I've done that many times with turkeys too. And so I think thinking ahead as to the end game of your shot and what the consequences are very important before you drop the string, no matter how excited you are. So
Yeah, that takes a little bit of experience, when
it
you're
does.
first
You're right.
few, you're just so
Absolutely.
excited and
Absolutely. That's funny you say that because I was just thinking about that. I don't know if I'd want to lose that excitement as a young archer. Like, let's say you had a young archer first, second year, and you wanted to just erase all that excitement and replace it with experience. You would lessen the experience because they're part of that excitement is not knowing what's going to happen, and you're so nervous and you don't know. You just want to get the shot off, and as you get older, you're able to kind of reel those emotions in, and you're still excited, but you're more focused, and you're like, okay, I've been here before. I know if I make this shot and hit him here, this is going to be the consequence of it for better or worse. And I think about that a lot. Like if I was younger and I think with anything in life, if you remove the excitement and replace it with experience, it's not as quite the same, moment. So I think life's supposed to be like that, right? You
yeah.
you got to make your mistakes and taste success and feel the sting of failure, and then at the end of the day, you're better for it. So, um, yeah, that's a good point you make because you're so right. We talk to kids and stuff about this experience stuff, like you got to do this and that, but don't forget they're just kids or new archers, and when that whitetail comes in, I mean, we forget everything. I mean, their hearts racing, you know. Just like I tell my son, he's a baseball player. We do all this batting stuff, and I said, when you step in the box, you're going to forget all this. You got to make it automatic. You practice so much that you don't think about it, and that goes for archery too. You got to be so in tune with your anchor point, your draw length, so that when you do make a bad shot or have bad form, your arrow's still going to have a nice margin of error. Um,
Yeah.
and that's why I think those things are so important. Practice and draw length and the right equipment, the face mask story, all that
Yeah.
stuff, all that stuff plays into whether you're going to come out on top or not. So, but yeah, I don't think I would have wanted to replace, better decisions and experience with the excitement I felt when I was a kid, because that kept me hungry. I didn't shoot a deer for 3 years. When I first started, I wasn't able to harvest a whitetail in Iowa for 3 years. I missed deer. I lost the first two does I shot at. It was a pretty dismal experience for me, but it kept me hungry. I mean, it kept me reading and asking questions and practicing. And um, I think if it had come easy, I'm not sure I would have been as open to learning and becoming better. So there is something to be said for that too.
Yeah. I think I hunted about 5 years before I shot my first
Yeah,
deer.
I know 3 years. I mean, people couldn't believe it. Like school, they'd be like, "How did you not get a deer yet? They're everywhere." And it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm putting the time in. I just can't get it done. And so, um,
Of course, you got
but
to
yeah,
realize when I started, there wasn't that many deer.
I know I didn't have any excuses though. You did when you started, there wasn't. When I started, there was quite a bit. This was 90. So I told you the story in 91 where I got introduced to archery, and then 92 is my first fall. I did not take one that fall. 93, I did not get one. And then in 94, towards the end of that season, I shot my first doe. So, and that was a big deal. I still remember the color of the tag, waking my friend Ryan up, going out there, so nervous. It had orange and white fletching. It was an aluminum arrow. It was a golden hawk bow. Um, and she didn't go 50 yards. And I still was dumbfounded that my arrow had done that job. Like, I couldn't believe an arrow could have taken an animal that majestic and big down so quickly. And that was my first whitetail, and I was 17 years old. So, and a lot of these kids are taking giant deer now at 12 years old. But we
Yeah.
all, we all have our own journey and our own road to get where we want to be. And so that was mine. But I'm grateful for it because without it, I don't think I would have been as hungry to learn. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a lot of stuff you learn from when you make a bad shot. You
oh,
actually learn more from that than you do a good shot.
you do,
Like,
you do.
what's going on here? What did I do? I had one time, I've been hunting quite a while and it's good shot. This doe comes walking in. I draw back and I shoot, and I completely missed that deer. That deer wasn't even 10 yards away. I didn't even come close to hitting it.
Right.
Like, what's And I always had a field tip with me, and so I pulled field tip, I picked the leaf and I nailed it. I'm thinking, what went wrong? I forgot to aim. I
I've
just
done
drew
it
back, looked at the deer.
many times. I've done it so many times, and it's painful. And I did that on a big buck in 2014, and I remember taking an arrow out of my quiver right after I missed, and there was a sapling right where he was sitting, and it must have been a 2-inch sapling, and I center punched that, and I never forget that. Like, and it's not the first time it happened to me either. One of the first deer that came in, I didn't even know this at the time, like gluing this is back when we glued the nocks onto the aluminum arrows. When I
Yep.
picked them up at the pro shop, they had glued the nocks on for me. I didn't ask, and they didn't say. And this buck comes in, and I went to draw. I was shooting fingers back then, and when I went to draw, the arrow came off the nock, and it just fell right below my stand. And I remember the buck looking at the arrow like, but I learned so much from that. Like every time now that I put an arrow on a string, I remember that story from
Yeah.
'93, and that's almost 30 some years ago. And I, pinched that knock on the string, and I touched, make sure there's just enough movement. But you're right, the failure of the knock story made me that much better at tuning and aware of those small details that can really make or break you. So, but you're right, without failure, we're never going to be as good as we could be. There's just no in anything. I think you got to have some failure to get better, to want to get better.
Well, there's a lot of things that we use daily that has failed many times. Like the story of WD-40. That's water displacement version 40. They
Uh-huh.
failed 39 times before they got it right.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I'll be
that's why
darned.
it's 40. If it
That
was
is
about 35,
amazing.
it'd be 35.
That is a great story. I did not know that. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Well,
cool.
everybody's got post-it notes, right?
Yeah.
That
I'm
was a
looking at one right
failure.
here. Yeah.
It was they were trying to develop an adhesive, and they put it on there and it seemed to pull off and keep resticking. It was a failure on what they're trying to do, so they come up with another thing, another use for it.
I'll be darned. It's yeah. There's so many stories. I mean, and there are probably hundreds more like that you just don't know. But when you hear about it, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So, yeah, those are fast. The older I get to, the more I appreciate those facts. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that people take for granted. A lot of the old sayings, um, come from something that was happening at the time.
right,
You know,
absolutely.
and like you say, somebody don't have enough brains to tan their own hide. Well, on an animal, there is enough. You can use the brains, it's brain tanning. The
Uh-huh.
brains of that animal, there's enough to tan that hide, and that's where that saying come from.
I'll be darned. I've heard. Yeah, I didn't know that either. That's interesting. Yeah, there's so many out there. So many little cliches and sayings. You wonder where it came from, and you know, yeah, somebody posted something the other day that I have saved somewhere. I was fascinated by it. Everything from throwing the baby out with the bathwater and all kinds of things like that. Why brides carry flowers down the aisle, and it was fascinating. I sent it to my father-in-law, and he was like, I didn't know. He's a very intelligent man and very up on history, and he was like, I didn't know any of this. So yeah, there's some cool stuff out there
Yeah, yeah, it's
from the
really cool
past.
stuff, and it's just I talk with practicing. What's the
Mhm.
difference between an amateur and a professional? Well, the amateur
Consistency.
practices until they can get it right. A
Mhm.
professional practices until they can't get it wrong.
That's right. I always tell my son the difference between like a AAA baseball player and a pro is the guys can do it every day. They can do it consistently every day, and it's like second nature to them. I mean, everybody has potential to be great once, but can you do it more than once and on demand? And I think
Right.
that's the difference between a professional and a novice is on demand and consistently. And you see that in pro archery all the time. Like these guys stand on the line, the world's looking down on them, and they're able to tune all that out and go back to their mechanics. They practice so much that it's mechanical. So I think if you get the emotional side of it, eventually you're going to have a bad day. And they're able to. I'm always impressed by that. My wife sometimes says, why are you watching this game? It's a tight game on teams I don't like. It's like I want to see the psychology of it. I want to see how well they're able to, kind of funnel down their emotions and keep the mechanics of a field goal kick or a pass or a pitch with a full count and the bases loaded. Or, like you said, a big whitetail comes in. You've made that shot thousands of times on the range, but in this situation, your emotions are different. you're stationary for a long time. I always find that fascinating, and so, but if you make, you're mechanically, sound, a lot of times you'll come through. So, but you're so right. Novice and professional consistency and on demand has always been my opinion on that.
Well, and one of the things that is a difference, the novice doesn't have a coach, the professional does.
Yeah, that's right. That's
What
right. That's
professional athlete does not have a coach?
that's true. And people think the opposite, right? Like they think, oh, he's a professional. Why does he need a coach for nutrition or lifting and in some ways they need it more than anybody because it takes them out of the play. They're like, tell me what to do. I'm good at doing what you tell me to do, and I've got good skills to do it, but I'll second guess myself 100 times over with what release I should use, what's my draw length, or in lifting, how many reps and sets should I do? So coaches I've really become to appreciate that in the last 5 years more than ever, how valuable having a coach, whether it's business or archery or anything in your corner can be. I don't have an archery coach now, but like I said, years ago, I had one that really opened my eyes to a couple things mechanically I was doing. And, but I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, they all have coaches in their lives. And I think people fail to recognize that. They think you just need it to become a pro, but in reality, you need it to stay a pro. So,
Well, and two, you say you've got a coach. The coach is also an archer, but that coach has a coach.
that's right. That's
They
right.
have somebody because it's real hard to see what's going on with yourself. Now with cameras and videos, I can record myself and I can critique myself. It's like, why am I doing it? I've done that. It's like, that's not what I said to do. I didn't do it,
Right.
So you can do that, but you got to be open to critiquing your own self. And that's tough
Very
to
tough.
do sometimes. And that's where
Very
somebody else can pick up something that you're not seeing. And that's where nice now, when I first become a coach in 95, um, there was pretty much, if you wanted to record it was on a VCR,
right.
you know. Um,
Yeah,
I,
same here.
I have some of the training courses. Uh, let's see. Yeah, there. Whoop, upside down. And if I shoot it, I can't get it to zoom in. There we go. This is volume
Oh,
6.
there it is. I see it.
Yeah. There's six
That's your
volumes in
video.
that video. It's a VCR. There's six when I went to get NFAA instruction. There were 6 volumes of that at different aspects of archery. It's on a VCR. So that's what we had then. Now,
Right.
much better quality on the phones. Your phones have much better quality. In fact, all my videos I do on YouTube are done off my phone. Um,
Oh yeah,
in order to get a digital camera to do that, I probably have to spend $5,000 or $6,000. That's
absolutely.
what my phone does
It's
on the
crazy.
quality.
It's crazy. It wasn't that long ago. I was looking at a truck and I asked the dealer, this is probably 5, 6 years ago. I said, does it have a CD player? And he says, a CD player. He goes, what? He goes, no, why would we need a CD player? And that's where all my music was at the time. And
Yeah,
it was like kind of embarrassing to say that to him because he was a younger kid and I remember telling my wife, like, gosh, I felt stupid bringing up a CD player. But when I would record myself on video all the time back in the day on VCR, and I still have tapes in my garage of everything from archery to baseball and that's how we would watch what we were doing to
yeah,
see what our form was, and and now it's so much more convenient and better, and who knows what the future holds? 20 years from now, what's it
right.
gonna be? So, but that's okay. I mean, that's just the sign of the times, and that's just life. So,
Well, and you can take that digital video, and there are applications. I use DaVinci Resolve for creating my videos for YouTube
okay,
because I edit them. And
okay.
I can go in here and I can go frame at a time. I can search you
Oh,
frame by frame just by hitting the right or left arrow key while I've got it up in play. I can pause it and I can hit it frame by frame going through the video. So, you can look at all the different aspects of it and you can comment and, um, it's, there's a lot you can do for analyzing that. And now, you can take a look at a video and you could do a lot of problem solving for somebody. I had one guy that I was looking at his forum and it's like, well, let's see, let's tweak one little bitty thing. All I could find was like, try this. It's just a minor change. Some of
sure.
it's like okay, let's just start with your grip on the bow wrong.
Right.
Let's change your grip.
Right.
Okay. Because people will have, that death grip like a baseball bat or something.
Right.
And then they have drawlings too long, they hit their arm. So the first thing I say, if you hit your arm, your drawling's too long.
Right.
and and then if it's not too long, then you're gripping and you got that elbow turned in.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of think that shooting through paper is the end all of if you can't shoot through paper, there's something wrong with your bow. I can take a perfectly tuned bow and shoot a perfect hole. I can always take that same bow and make a terrible shot.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I've I've got away from paper quite a bit. In fact, I don't hardly ever do it at all anymore. I just bare shafts and yoke tune mostly myself. That's how I do it for time, and it matters, how taut the paper is, what kind of paper you have, how far away you are. I'll never forget, this is a true story. My friend Matt, who owns a pro shop here, um, I remember I had this bow. This is probably 8 years ago, and I couldn't get it to tune. I couldn't get it to tune. He's a lefty, and I'm a righty,
Yeah.
and I'm downstairs playing with paper, and this is before I really got, this is about 10 years ago, before I got into yoke tuning pretty heavy. And he grabbed my bow as lefty, and it had this terrible left tear, and he grabbed my bow as a left-hander. He drew it back, and he shot a perfect hole through paper just by manipulating his grip. And I never forgot that. I'm like, I was so embarrassed because I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's not even it's a right-handed bow, and he's shooting a left-handed, and he got a perfect hole. And that opened my eyes
Actually
to
shot it left-handed, huh?
absolutely. And I felt like I was chasing my tail after that. I'm like, I got to find a better system here. So then I got into bear shafts and yoke tuning, and that's, and with kids too, it's so much easier for me to go in the backyard, shoot 2 or 3 bear shafts, make the adjustments, go back. And once I got it, I mean, 95% perfect with the bear shaft at 20 yards. Once I go back to broadheads and fletched, I hardly have any trouble,
Yeah.
ever. So, and that's just my system. But yeah, paper, you're right. So many people get caught up on paper, and it's like, it's such a snapshot in time too. I don't know if you agree with that, but at 3 feet or 6 feet or 12 feet, these snapshots in time, whereas, the bear shaft, at least for me, has really showed me the flight. Even if it hit where I wanted it to hit with the bear shaft, I could see it doing the wrong thing on the way there. And I didn't like that until I would get lasers. I would continue to fine tune and tweak, the rest and the yokes until I got it just right. So,
Well, and where paper is perfect is if you're underspined on your arrow.
okay.
Because
Okay. That's it.
you shoot it at different distances. You're tearing left, you're tearing right, tearing left, tearing right, or tearing up and down and up and down. That tells you that the arrow is just going fishtailing back and forth,
Okay.
underspined arrow.
Okay.
Other than that, it don't really tell you much because, like you said, it's a point in time.
It's a
And if you
snapshot.
shoot
Yeah.
it far enough away, it's going to be a perfect hole anyway.
Right.
Shoot it
Exactly.
at 20 yards, it's a perfect hole. Shoot it
Right.
at 5 yards, it might be a terrible hole.
I remember
Because
once I
it's
was
going to
younger,
stabilize.
I kept moving it farther back just to get a perfect hole because I couldn't get a perfect hole. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep moving farther back. So yeah, the things we learned, and once again, that's a great example of if I could only go back in time. I remember in '94 through probably 2000, and I shoot a lot of mechanicals and fixed. I've shot both. I do both. But 95 through 2000 or so, I remember I'd shoot all summer 3D, and then it would be time to screw on the fixed blade. And I would sit there almost like, please, please, Lord, let this fly true, because I didn't know how to fix it. And most of the time it wouldn't. It would, go down and, veer off to the left or the right. And all I remember reading in those magazines back in the day was, if you have a tune bow, your broadhead will shoot correctly. And you should broadhead tune. They were using the words, but no one would ever tell you how. They wouldn't
Right.
really explain it because I'm not even sure they knew. And then I wish I could remember his name. He was from Archery Talk, and I spoke to him for about 3 hours one night. This is just before I got married, almost 15 years ago. And he talked for 3 hours. We talked about bear shafts and yoke tuning, and how that, like you explained, with the underspine arrow, and it just, all the light bulb went off. Like you said, you can hear things 100 times, but finally, for everybody, it's one thing that just puts it all and puts a bow around it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it now. And now I wish I could go back and get that bow from '95 and see if I could screw on that big fixed blade and get it to shoot well. With knowing what I know now, about the cams and how I could have just, shimmed the cam over a little bit, even though there was no yokes on it, and got a better tune. But that's the beauty of it. The fact that I failed as tuning early in my career kept me hungry to learn how to tune. And
Right.
therefore I kept reading and learning and asking. If I had shot bullet holes or I had someone do it for me, which also is kind of a pet peeve of mine. I really think you got to tune your own bow, based on grip, like you said. I don't think I ever would have learned to, tune like I do now. So, and again, that's my system. That's how it's worked for me. But compared to where I was a dinosaur. I mean, way back then, I was, you
Yeah.
know, put the arrow on straight and hope for the best. So, yeah, it's just a process. It's just a process.
Now, maybe you could explain to our audience what you mean by bare shaft and yoke tuning.
Sure. So a bear shaft is just like it sounds. So you take an arrow, and an arrow can have fletching on it, whether it's plastic or feathers. Now imagine if you just took those feathers or plastic veins off, or you took an arrow before it was fletched. Now, some people, and you can, chime in, Roy, as you see fit if you think I'm wrong in saying this, but some people put a little bit of tape on the back or make a little more weight on the back. I've never really got into that. I use wraps a lot on the back of my arrows. So sometimes my old arrows, I'll just shave the fletchings off of the fletching that I've torn in practice, and I'll have just a field tip on. You never ever want a bare shaft with a broadhead, just so people know that. Like,
Right.
never ever do that. But if you have just your normal 100 grain or 125 grain field tip, a normal arrow, the nock on the end, and no feathers, no fletching. Just it looks like a spear or a javelin. And you put that on your bow, and you preferably try to do this at 10 to 20. I'd say 10 to 15 yards to start, because at 20 it can really mess with your mind if your form's not good or your grip's not good.
Right.
So I say 10 to 15 yards, and you just shoot that arrow at your target. Now, when you shoot that arrow, because there's no fletching on it, there's no steering aid, there's nothing to, mask your errors, if you will, in release or spine or any of that, or tune. And so that arrow will either go straight down, straight up, or it'll hit the target fairly close to where you're aiming, but the nock may be way off to the left, almost like you put a javelin into a wall and then cranked it 45 degrees to the
Right.
left. And that's what I mean by a bear shaft. So you're shooting arrows with no fletching on it. And then based on the response of those arrows, you can then adjust your bow with the cams and the strings and the rest to get that bear shaft. So when you shoot at a target, it's going straight and fairly right, almost where you want it to. And then when you go back to your fletched arrows, you can have a lot of sloppy form. You can sometimes punch the trigger, you can grip wrong, and you're still going to be way closer to where you're aiming than you would have otherwise. So it's a huge confidence builder too. Sometimes I'll shoot a whole 3D course with the bear shaft. And once you get past 20 yards, then your form really, and I don't know if you agree with this, really dictates the consistency of your,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if you
Definitely.
if you don't release clean, or you peak, or you turn your wrist wrong, that arrow will let you know it. It's almost like a governor just lets you know right away. Nope, there's a bad release. And it's also a great confidence booster if at 30 yards you can put a bear shaft, into even an 8 ring. You're like, wow, like I didn't have any fletchings on that arrow. And then all of a sudden you can put on almost any fixed blade you want within reason. Um, and you'd be shocked at how accurate you can be. So I think a lot of these guys get online and they always say, like, well, if you were tuned, you could shoot that broadhead, or if you were, and the guys that have been gracious to me and kind to me and taught me how to do this stuff through the years have said, look, once you tune your bow a proper way, your arrow spine's reasonable, you're going to be fine. And you'll be able to shoot your muzzy or your slick trick, or, your Wenzel woodsman, whatever you want to do based on your preferences, versus having to shoot a mechanical. Now I go through all of that. I shoot all summer, and then around August, I'll pull the bear shaft out, and I'll really get into it, and I'll really dial it in, and I'll take a pen and I'll mark my yokes and how many turns, and I'll get it all locked in. And I still shoot mechanicals for whitetails right now, but I still go through all the bear shafting, because I still think I shoot a better arrow whether I'm shooting a mechanical or fixed with a perfectly tuned bow.
Right.
So so that's why I bear shaft tune, because not only does it make me more accurate, but it gives me confidence too. Like, if this whitetail I shot last year, he came in from behind me, I had to turn around, weave around the tree, lean to my left, come to full draw, and stop him and shoot. And all that was just not perfect. I mean, my wrist wasn't, I just know it wasn't. I had the safety belt against my back, and I was, and all those little things. When I remember seeing that arrow fly, it was beautiful. It was just a perfect arc right over that little twig. And then, and I wonder, if my arrow wasn't perfectly tuned, would I have been as close as I was in the vital zone? So yeah, that's my opinion on bear shaft. I don't know if you feel differently about what I said, but that's kind of how I view it.
Oh no, you're all wrong.
Well, I could be, like I said, I'm always open to people telling me how I can do things better.
No, no, I'm just kidding, of course. But yeah, no, that's what you want to do is you want to, if you can get it flying straight without it fletching, because the fletching is only going to help stabilize it. And when I set up a bow, I have levels and lasers that I set up the bow with.
Mhm.
So you put it in, there's a jig that you can use, hold it really nice. And then you put the level on the string and you adjust it so that it's plumb.
Mhm.
And then so it's not tilting or anything. So your string is perfectly um, vertical.
Mhm.
And then you also have to have the level on your rest or on the riser, make sure that is level. So now you got level and plumb. And then when you put your rest on, you adjust your rest where you want it to go, just slightly above the burger button hole. Uh,
Mhm.
People don't know the burger button is the hole where you mount your rest in.
The rest, the big bolt hole.
And then I put a level on the tip of the arrow and I adjust it till it's level, and that's where the knot goes. So now that arrow is perfectly level with your riser.
Correct.
And now then you take off your sight if you have one on there, take a sight off, you bolt the laser on there and you adjust it so it comes back, so it rotates up and down your shaft. You rotate it back till it's centered right in the middle of your string. Then you take it out to the tip, and it should be right at the very tip of the arrow. And you adjust left and right for there. Now your setup, that's your perfect setup. The only thing that you could possibly change is how high or low that arrow sits in your bow.
Mhm.
That's the only thing left to adjust because everything else, because they're center shot design risers. They're
Right.
designed to be center shot. And
Right.
you can't do that with the old ones because they weren't center shot design risers. They always pointed out away from the riser because they weren't center shot design. And
Right.
that's a PSC patent, the center shot design risers.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yep.
that, but
They
okay,
own
that's good.
many patents. They never enforced it. They patented it, they designed it, they patented it, and let any bow manufacturer use it. He didn't want to keep it exclusive to him. Pete Shelpley he patented it, so it's his patent. But that's the way he was doing it. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
there, you do that, and you're going to be shooting pretty much perfect holes. Um, there, the only thing you'd go there once you get that set up, shoot your bear shafts and see how they fly.
Mhm.
And if they're
Mhm.
not flying right, it's because the difference between when you draw a full draw, is the string pushing straight through or is it off just a little bit?
Mhm.
You want to be in that center sweet spot. And,
Yeah. And
and
that
that's
was
why
described one of the best ways someone described it to me once was with the center shot was where the strongest force of the string was directly behind the arrow. You
yes,
know, if I mean you're in the like if you took one of those little matchbox cars when we were kids and you'd pull it back and get it all cranked and you let it go and it was fun when it went straight and right through the cans you had up and other times it veers off to the right or left. If your center shot's perfect, that string is directly behind the arrow so that the full force of that string is going right through the center of the arrow and therefore whether it's a bear shaft or a broadhead you're going to get the best flight possible so
right.
but it's always fascinating it's like a great swing with baseball or golf like people can start differently with their tuning process but the end game's the same like we want that when the contact is made that arrow has to come off the same for everybody to have the best consistency and accuracy so um I know guys do things differently with tuning, but there comes a point where there's certain aspects or principles that have to be, mirrored if you want to have success with the tuning, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why, when I put a loop on, I don't put a knock point above it to hold it. My loop is my knock point, and I tie the upper one. I get
uh-huh,
that position based on the level, and I
uh-huh,
put that one tight, and I tie down below it, and now
uh-huh,
and I'm squeezing that knot, the knot's closer to it, and then I'll pull really hard, so there is no gap. That arrow cannot move up or down. Now you're
mm-hmm,
pulling directly behind the knock
uh-huh,
and you release that center point that goes because your string's going to go straight to the knock. So you're
mm-hmm,
pulling back and you got the bend on each side. If that is
Mhm.
evenly spaced, it's going to push the arrow straight. So to see the effects of that, take a pencil or something and set it on the table and put your finger on the eraser part and push straight to the tip. Your arrow's going to go straight, or your pencil's going to go straight. Now take and turn your hand just slightly off and see what that pencil does. It won't go straight.
Right.
And you're
Same
only off
principle.
by just maybe 1 degree.
1 degree. Yep.
Yeah, that'll make
Absolutely.
that arrow go not right. And you'll see that when you're shooting bare shafts. You're going
Exactly.
to see all that. What's it doing? Is it sending it off? Because there's no fletching. If you send your arrow off at an angle, there's nothing to straighten it out.
Exactly.
So with the fletching, it's going to force it to straighten out. If
Exactly.
even a bad arrow that flies off all weird, long a distance, the arrow's going to stabilize
That's right. With the
because the
fletching.
fletching forces it.
Yeah, with the fletching. Yep. Yeah,
And
that's why it's so frustrating with paper too, right? Like if you you can shoot a bear shaft through paper, and sometimes it's fun for me to do that. I'll do it at the end when I'm all done, and I'm just curious to see how it does. And 9 to 10 times, it's a bullet through paper once you get it lined up at 20 yards. I mean, it's going through there straight because any deviation along that course, like you said, will make that arrow dip, dive, or go crazy like a boomerang. With the fletching can mask, I mean, so much.
right,
And I know you're not wrong in how it comes off the string, and that's the like I said, it comes into the confidence. Like when you get it bare shaft tuned, knowing you can shoot at 20 yards, and then to follow that up, you shoot the bare shaft at 20, and then you follow it up with a fletched arrow, and I love to see them kind of touching, when I'm done, then and the confidence you get from that when you're in the tree stand, knowing okay. If I make a mistake, it's not because my equipment wasn't as good as I could make it. What did one guy say once? A buddy of mine, or he gave me a quote. He said, "You'll never outshoot your bow," and I never
oh,
forgot that. It's a great quote. You'll never outshoot your bow, meaning that bow, if it is tuned and a hooter shooter will always shoot well, but the human factor will always be subpar compared to the mechanics of that bow. It's just a matter of can get it fit for you and tuned for you and shooting the best that you possibly can, because the machine's not the problem, it's us.
you're right.
Not, most of the time. So at least it's
We're,
me. It's
we're
me.
the defective machine drawing the
Right.
bow.
Right. But those are the things I learned, halfway through my archery career that I wish I'd known earlier. But at the same time, it was fascinating when you learn stuff and you get hungry again. I think knowledge, spawns interest. And if you got it all figured out, I mean, it'd be boring. So, there's all kinds of tips and tricks to keep learning and practicing and becoming better at.
Yeah, there's all kinds of um, tricks that you can learn, or not really tricks, but just techniques to get better. And um, I know I had one guy that's done a whole lot of analysis on arrow flight and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
there's a heavy part of your arrow. Do you find the heavy part of your arrow so that you know where the seam is? Because where the seam is, it's going to be
Yeah.
heavier. Do you line all those up?
Hmm.
And then you have the envelope and around the broadhead and the fletching. And how the fletching lines up with the broadhead is going to change how that arrow reacts.
Hmm.
And on mine, I shoot Muzzy, and I
Hmm.
have what they call a little U-bar. It's a little cone-shaped washer, and put a rubber O-ring on there, and
Hmm.
you tighten it down, and you can adjust it. And what I found on tuning it to get them to group is if you tweak it a little bit tighter or a little bit looser, it'll direct that broadhead in different places because the alignment between the
Right.
airfoil formed around the broadhead versus the fletching. Now I use 4-inch feathers, so I have a little bit
Yep.
better drag
So
down.
do I. Yeah.
Um, I don't like veins. I just like feathers.
Feathers are cool. I mean, they've got a nostalgia to them that they're hard to beat. They're hard to beat.
Right.
This last year was the first year in a long time I shot vanes, and only because of I got arrows ordered late and I couldn't get the fletching. And I was busy with my kids and I wasn't. But I've shot feathers from 15 through 21. I had feathers 6 years in a row, and I had all kinds of different cool ones. I'll go back to them this year, but yeah, I love feathers. I got 4-inch, 4-inch four fletch, so
Oh, you're
they're
doing four fletch?
yeah, they're so cool looking. I mean, and the way they look in your quiver, and like I said, there's a part of archery that's part of one of the things I've always loved about it is the look of a finished arrow. You know, I just think they're pretty cool looking. So,
And you can crest them and all kinds of different
yeah,
stuff with them. On my
right.
hunting ones, I have a white reflective wrap I put on there.
Uh-huh.
I cut them in half because I don't want to fletch over the wrap.
Right.
I'm cheap. I don't want to cut my feathers off and then have to do the whole wrap. So
Sure.
I cut them in half and I wrap in front of my fletching.
Okay.
And it's amazing how much those flashlights will pick that little reflective white
Oh yeah, that's
reflective wrap
huge.
off of there. I've seen them underneath trees. Like there it is. I'd have never found it otherwise.
Yeah, that's true. And this last year, I usually shoot the boning knocks, and this last year I was hunting a property that was very thick and nasty, and I ended up shooting nocturnals. But like I said, I'm a big kind of a tuning, really into it. I want to make sure it shoots well. So
Yeah, there we
I
go.
remember shooting. Yeah, there you go. I see that.
That's like this is my son's arrow. It's a gold tip tradition, so it looks like a wood arrow, but it's actually carbon.
I love that arrow. I know my brother has those. He shoots a recurve, and he's got those, and they're pretty neat.
Nice thing about the carbon is they don't bend and break as easy as the wood.
Oh no, not at
And here's
all.
the feathers. We got two yellow and one gray barred feather on it.
That's great. And I apologize. I said earlier I have four fletched 3-inch feathers is what I shoot.
Oh, for its 3-inch
Yeah.
feathers.
Yeah. Three inch, but four fletched. So, as I was looking at yours there, but yeah, I think that's the cool thing too. There's so many different things we can try and, but it all comes down to, arrow placement and consistency, at the end of the day. And that's, I think, is going to get you the most success. So, not necessarily broadhead size or I remember once I used to back in the day, like 10 years ago when I was hunting some bigger game like moose and things like that, I had an 80-pound bow and it was for no other reason than my draw length's 27 inches. And I was a lot younger. It was fine. It didn't bother my shoulders. I did well with it, but I was hunting turkeys that spring and I've done that for almost 30 years with the bow. It was an 80-pound bow with a big mechanical, like a 3-inch mechanical. And it was one of those broadheads with a blunted tip. And my buddy had said, I want you to try this. Let me know what you think of it. I remember shooting a gobbler that morning, and that arrow didn't even go in a quarter of an inch to this giant bird at 12 yards with an 80-pound bow. And I
Wow.
hit him I'll never forget it. I have pictures of it. And it was in that moment that not that I realized, but that I was reminded that I don't care what you're shooting, 80 pounds, 60 pounds, 50 pounds, if you shoot the ball joint of a whitetail or you hit a turkey in the wrong spot, you are not going to recover that animal. And
No.
there's just no there's no substitute for accuracy. And that is the one thing I'll tell young archers, like shoot what you want, but I'll take somebody with a 50-pound bow who can shoot it. We never talk about this. These recurve guys are shooting 50-pound recurves and blowing through whitetails and big game. And we shoot a 60-pound bow or something, and somebody's at a compound, they're all up in arms, like, oh my gosh, I'm not shooting enough weight. And guys with recurves have been doing it for centuries. So um, yeah, sometimes I have to remind myself of that too. Like just put it where you need to put it and things will work out. And if you don't,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a sleepless night. So
They do
um,
generally shoot a little heavier arrow.
yeah, they do. That's true. And that's true. They do, push. I can't remember what my buddy Mitch shoots, but I know he's upward over 600, 600 grains, but I think my arrows I'm shooting now right about 420 is when I'm 70 pounds at 420 is what I've kind of leaned on the last few years. So, and it's been a nice combo for me. So I know in 2010, I was shooting 550 grain arrows when I was, chasing momentum and then, but sacrificing some distance a little bit, past 30 yards. I had to really be tuned into where that animal was. But it's fascinating. No matter how fast you shoot with archery, past 30 yards, there's not a whole lot of difference, right away. But the farther you get, whether you're got a 400 grain arrow or 600, if you're off by 5 yards, you're going to miss. I mean, if you're off in your
Yeah.
estimation, you will miss. I don't care if you're shooting 300 feet per second. To really see those graphs as to how far arrows drop, it's fascinating once you get out far enough. So I've settled on 420 grains and about 70 pounds, and that's kind of my sweet spot the last few years. So
Yeah, I know. My arrows are about 370, but then I ordered in some hunting arrows to try out that PSE had, and they come in overspined. They're
Oh,
they go 1, 2, 3, 4. That higher number is the stiffer spine. Of course, the heavier the arrows too. Well, they were 400 spines. They're marked as 300s. So they weighed about 420, by the time I put 100 grain broadhead on there. Well, I wanted to replace them with my normal ones that I shoot, and they're like 370. So I had some weight tubes. So I'm trying to add in weight tubes to get them all the same weight, to get them up there in that weight, because I didn't want to resight all my bow in.
right, right.
So, I had to add the weight. So now they're up to that. But
I know what you mean. I've done that before with broadheads, and not to that degree, but shooting a bigger broadhead or making sure the spine stay consistent. But I know what you mean. Yeah, sometimes you don't want to match otherwise you're changing your sight, your sights and and a lot of times when you gap shoot too, like I'm so familiar with my equipment that a 33-yard shot, I know exactly how much drop I'm going to get with my 420 grain arrow. If I
yeah,
shot a 500 grain arrow, I was going to have to, relearn that, how much drop I'm going to get at that distance. And so there's something to be said for that because, if a whitetail's at 31 yards, a lot of times, most of the time, I'll just compensate with my 20-yard pin. I gap shoot so much on the 3D course, rather than put my 30-yard pin on I'm able to just elevate it 3 or 4 inches, and I'm actually more stable that way and know the drop of the arrow into where I want to hit. And I know not everybody's like that, but it's worked well for me. So, but you change the weight, you change the trajectory, it's different. So,
well, and then if I change weight, that meant I had to change all my pins,
absolutely, yeah, everything, and more so
because
with
the spacing is different. I'd have to move them closer because they're lighter arrow. They can be faster, and you
right.
don't need a fast light arrow
No.
to do it. My first deer I shot, I was shooting 52 pounds. That's as low as the bow would go, and I was shooting 21 17s, 4-inch feathers, 3 fletched, 100 and I think it was 125 or 145 grain broadhead, muzzy,
Mhm.
or blade. I was about 20 feet up in the tree, and the deer was 40 yards away. And when I shot, that deer turned around, that arrow was hanging almost, I think the fletching stopped it from going out the other side of the deer. Almost had a complete pass through at that range with that heavy arrow.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, that's what blows my mind about, archery is like, the amount of force those arrows can, you know, exhibit. And I remember shooting a bison. This was 10 years ago this fall at 40 yards, 40 or 44 yards, and it was a 500 grain arrow with a fixed blade slick trick. Um, and that arrow went clean through him like a knife through butter. Like we found that arrow about 30 or 40 yards past the bison when we went back to look for it. Um, and that's a huge animal, but it shows
Yeah.
that just a testament to what a sharp arrow can do behind a modern compound. So, and like I said, I have a 27-inch draw. And so even if I shot 80 pounds, someone at 29 inches is shooting at 70 pounds is shooting as much as I am. So, to put an arrow through a 2,000-pound animal, and the animal was down in 30 seconds. It's just fascinating to me how fast that can
Good
happen.
shot.
Yeah,
Good shot placement.
yeah, exactly. When it's right, and when it's wrong, it's wrong. Whether it's a 200-pound whitetail or a 2,000-pound, bison. If you're not hitting them well, you're just not going to have success. So, yeah, I think, like you said, consistency and draw length and finding the equipment that works best for you is the key. So,
And those heavier arrows have an advantage over the light, fast arrows, because once your speed gets up to a certain point,
mm-hmm.
your form is the biggest factor in where you're going to hit.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah,
forgiving. A fast bow, start getting over 300 feet per second, and especially those they're trying to shoot 320. They're not forgiving. They're very, very
right.
picky bows in your form. If
I
your
agree.
form is off a fraction, it's
You're
going to
done.
throw it. Where
I
that
agree.
slower, heavier arrow, you can, I've done it. It's like I've shot. It's like, that was a terrible shot. No, if I didn't get an X,
Yeah.
you know,
I agree. I agree. I
you're
chased through
not
it.
shooting those speed bows.
I chased it when I was a kid. When I first started in '94, I remember going to the pro shop. I said, I want to shoot 300 feet per second. I remember telling them this, and they get me an overdraw and these little dart arrows. And I remember shooting those things, and they were so fast, but I couldn't control it. I mean, it was, and then I started chasing speed again in 2000, mid 2000s, with a PSE and a 350 grain arrow. Once again, didn't have as much consistency. And then all of a sudden I dropped down. Now my sweet spot is like 260 to 275. I love that speed and I can control it. I know where it's going. I just have to practice and know my equipment. But that 270 is kind of like if I can get a 400 grain, 420 grain arrow at 270, I'm super happy,
Yeah.
and once again, 30, 40, 50 yards, even at 300 feet per second at 50 yards, if I misjudge that by 3 or 4 yards, I'm going to miss. I'm going to be low or high, depending, and inside of 20, I'm going to be a half inch off at 500 grains or 350. I mean, it just doesn't move that much. I was always shocked by that, like how much little difference there was close and how big a gap there was in the distance. So just settled on that low 400 range and 270 ish for me. And that's kind of where I'm at, my sweet spot. So,
Yeah, and that's kind of the fun of it, just trying to figure out what you want to do and what you shoot the best for. And you know, I can remember overdraws on bows, to get that speed in there and get the heavy arrows and trying to get some speed out of them and then your tip of your arrow is back behind your hand.
yeah.
It's like I
Yeah,
don't.
not good. I remember that. I still remember those carbon arrows, and they looked like literally like darts. I mean, um, and just didn't enjoy the sound of the bow too was so loud.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
because you're close to dry firing them.
yeah, exactly.
When you get those light arrows.
It felt bad. It sounded bad. It wasn't good. So, but yeah, that's how you come to terms with all of that. That's how you learn your equipment, and learn yourself, and there's trial and error. You got to go one way and come back, go the other way, come back, and we wouldn't expect anybody to know this right out of the gates. You'd be like, how do you know that? You almost want to hear these stories of too fast, too slow, too long, too short, too heavy. And then you just figure out what's best.
Well, and that's why when I set up a bow, I want the tip of the arrow at full draw to be in front of the riser.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I shoot my arrows now with the broadhead are well in front of my hand and my riser. I don't bring them back. I don't bring them back past the riser at all. Now that you mention it, I shoot a little longer arrow than I probably could for that reason. So,
Yeah, and if they're back further, when I worked at Bass Pro, I had this guy come in. He was telling his story that he drew back, the arrow fell off his wrist. He did not know it. He has a three right here on. Let me see if I can get right here on this part of his hand. He has three little scars. The broadhead went through his hand.
I believe
It
it.
was on his hand, and he pulled the trigger and shot it through his hand.
I believe it. That's happened. I haven't wounded myself, but I've had arrows come off at full draw and in windstorms or with a knock that was too tight. And I've been in situations where I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to get out of this? Like, I can't get the arrow back on the rest and the arrow's too short. And I ended up having to pop the arrow kind of up and then shooting to get it off my forearm because it was so short. And
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Where if it's too long, it comes off, it's sitting on your forearm, but at least it's the broadhead's away from you. And these are rare circumstances that shouldn't happen very often, but it does happen. I mean, things happen and sometimes there's no coming back from that if you're not careful. And these are dangerous, dangerous things we're shooting. I mean, high speed razor blades. And
Yeah.
when you think about it. So I agree with you. Get that thing away from your hands so when things go wrong, they don't go really wrong. So
Yeah. Well, and I was talking about, the a little bit earlier, the power of archery. And I think it was back in the 60s, the military actually had an archery um, squad
mhm.
shooting bows, recurves. And the video shows them shooting like there's a box, I don't know, maybe a foot box with a piece of cardboard in two splits in three sections. They shot it with a 45. It penetrated the outside layer of the cardboard, stopped in the dirt in the middle. Then they shot it with 30 cal,
Mhm.
an M1 carbine. And it went through the second layer, stuck in the third one. And then they shot it with a 06. It still not penetrate that box. Then they shot it with a broadhead out of a recurve. It went through about 6 inches through that thing, through all that dirt. The broadhead cut through for better penetration than a .06 six did, and they're shooting at archery range.
Yeah, it's amazing what arrows can do. I mean, and like I said earlier, it's always amazed me and continues to amaze me the power they have and how efficiently they can take down a large, large animal. And certainly nothing to take lightly. And like I said, recurve guys have been doing it forever.
Yeah,
50 pounds, 600 grain arrows and blowing and fixed blades and just blowing through animals and making good, solid short recoveries. So all comes down to accuracy and shot placement and consistent arrow flight. So yeah, but chasing speed and all those things that we did when we were younger, trying for sure. There's no hacks, right? There's no shortcuts
no,
to most good things in life. There's no shortcuts. You gotta kind of earn your way there, and I think we just gotta learn the hard way sometimes.
yeah, we do. Well, archery is a sport that's 64,000 years old. So I found evidence that dated back
Right.
that far. And
I know it's amazing. The history of it is fascinating and um yeah, and hopefully it's here to stay for a long time.
well, and there are some militaries that still use bow and arrow
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard
because
that.
you're in an area, they're quiet. You're not going to hear it go off. And if it is, you're not going to hear enough that
Right.
a gun going off, they're going to hear it. And with
Right.
a bow going off, you're not really going to hear it. And what noise you do have isn't that loud.
Right.
So, in some situations, that's the best weapon.
That's right. Yeah, they're definitely potent weapons and nothing. I take my kids out, when we shoot, I really am strict with them and let them know this is nothing to dabble with. This is a lot of these times too with these weapons that we use, there is no coming back. I mean, there's no second chance if you make a mistake and you hurt somebody or yourself. So I do take it very seriously and make sure my kids can tell you, they're big on this line thing. They're not allowed to draw their bow or shoot the bow if anybody's past the line that we deem in our
Right.
backyard, and it's funny they call each other out too because sometimes they get excited shooting, and one will grab an arrow and put it on the string and get ready, and I'm still pulling arrows, and the other one will say, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa," stop, like, and then now that they're so good, they're just like the bows don't even come up. They're pointed down, no arrow on them, waiting for me to get back behind the line before they start. So I think that's what we got to be really cognizant of is safety first, and because Lord knows they can do some damage.
Oh yeah, there's a lot, teach safety, that's what's the three best rules you need? Safety, safety, safety,
Safety.
you know.
Yeah, there's no coming back from a bad mistake. So and it's my responsibility too, as the teacher of my kids. It's my fault if they have access to an arrow behind the line. I'm pulling the arrow and they end up shooting me. I should never have had that arrow in a place they could have shot it when they weren't ready. And so those are things I've had to learn too. As you're teaching them form and okay, don't shoot if I'm past the line. But they sometimes forget that and
Right,
they're into it. They're making better progress and they're getting closer to hitting that paper fox. And they grab an arrow and they want to just shoot another one. And it's happened to me a couple times, a few years ago where I turn around and my little 6-year-old is sitting there with an arrow just about to draw. And it's a little tiny bow, but it still could go
oh
right through.
yeah, yeah,
And I've had to scare him a little bit by saying, "Whoa, you'll put it down." And, he gets upset and he's sad. And then I feel bad because I shouldn't have ever had him in that position to begin with. He should have walked up with me to pull the arrows. We should have hung the bows up after we shot the round. Um, you just got to it's no different than having ammunition laying around when you're not paying attention. So
right,
um, I think it's on the parents to make sure the kids aren't put in a position to make a mistake. Same thing with gun safety. You give a kid a 12 gauge on a pheasant hunt and two roosters get up in front of him, he's going to swing on them. You've got to be so aware of your kid's knowledge and skill set I think everybody should take their kids out separately pheasant hunting and get them in front with the dog and, because those things happen and
right.
in a duck blind or a pheasant field. And um, it's our responsibility to make sure they're not put in those positions to make those mistakes until they're old enough to get out there on their own. So I remember that day when that bow was coming up and my little boy was getting ready to shoot again. I was still down range.
Yeah,
And I remember, and I think I scared him off of archery for a little while because I was hard on him about it. But looking back, and even that day, I remember thinking I made the mistake. It was my fault for leaving a couple arrows left in the quiver and the bow in his hand while I went to get the couple more arrows so he could keep shooting. So, yeah. So we
Yeah.
all got to be careful out there.
Well, and it's all about safety. I know, my son I was out pheasant hunting and, just new and, his shotgun was loaded. And I says, I'm going to ask you three questions. You fail any one of them one time, you're unloading the gun, you're done shooting for the day. And one was, where's everybody in the hunting party? And he had to be able to tell me where everybody was at. And then I also say, okay, is your safety on? That was another question I asked him. Is your safety on? If it wasn't on, then he's unloaded and done for the day. Then the next question was, okay, where would you expect to see somebody all of a sudden show up in front of you? So he had to point out, all the places that somebody could all of a sudden show up because maybe there's another hunting not in your party and you don't realize it, or they're coming around and, there's around the trees. He had to point out all the places that somebody could all of a sudden show up,
Mhm.
unexpectedly. And he'd
Mhm.
point all those places. And you know what? He never failed. He always
Well, good
got
for
all
him.
those.
That's
And
great.
he was telling me one time he was out hunting with some buddies of his, and none of them had their safeties on. He says that I stayed back behind them, and that was the last time he went with them. It's like,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, those are the things you realize when you hunt. That's why it's been so long since I've group hunted because I'm archery hunt now. But those are the things I used to pay attention to. Was you know, I remember once on a South Dakota pheasant hunt, we were getting out of the truck and I was two steps in front of another gentleman. He had a side by over and under. He was putting his gloves on, and the gun went off, and it blew a basketball sized hole about 2 feet in front of my foot.
oh,
I'll never forget that. And I'm like, and he was very experienced, a very good shot. And he kind of played it off like it was no big deal because I think he was so embarrassed by it. But I remember thinking, man, I almost lost my leg,
yeah,
because we saw these roosters and we were going to drive this field and people are getting out. They load their guns, they put their gloves on, and safety's not on. Boom, and so, like I said, one mistake can ruin life. Um,
right.
in these sports we play, it's not like a wild pitch or an interception. I mean, this is life or death sometimes, and it's nothing to be messed with. So, yeah, good for you for teaching the right way, and good for your son for doing it the right way.
Well, and I had, when I had my archery store, one of the guys that come in all the time was a bow hunter, and then um, he was he ended up being in a tree stand, shot another hunter, another bow hunter, and both of them had come into the store, not at the same time. So I got to hear both sides of the story. And the guy was walking out, and the guy that shot him was in there and heard it coming. I heard him walking and thought it was a deer and shot it. Well, one, he made a mistake. He couldn't identify the deer, that it was a deer, not a human. The guy walking out probably didn't have his flashlight on, so he couldn't see the light. And then we've all been there. Um, it's getting dark, and that tree now looks like a deer, or it's getting light, and
Mm-hmm.
that tree looks like a deer, and you swear the deer is standing right there, been standing there all morning, and it's a tree, So he probably didn't identify his target, and of course it cost him and his insurance quite a bit, but I got both stories coming in. It just so happened that they both ended up in my store. Um, but yeah, it's one of those, you didn't identify your target, and you
Right. And
always have to positively identify your target.
that's everything, right? It goes back to what we said about, 2, 3 decades into your career, you're learning about giant buck comes in, quartering to you, you're full draw, pin on the deer. You're not thinking about, the hero shot or the harvest. You're thinking, okay, I might lose this animal if I take this shot. Same thing when you're younger. On a different note, you just want that animal. You don't fail to realize who's behind you, what it could be. But unfortunately, it's not a lost animal, it's a lost life, or you hurt somebody. So you got to really hammer that home to these kids, or even a new hunter who's 40 or 50 who just starts is so
Right.
excited. They make bad decisions. You really gotta, I don't think you can ever say it enough. Like, listen, at low light, you're gonna hear walking coming in and all kinds of things. You gotta identify that target, and if not, it's not worth it. Just let it go and lower your bow down and get out of there. But unfortunately, accidents will continue to happen because our emotions get in the way.
Yeah.
So
And that's where, spending a lot of time in the field and seeing those different things and seeing those things happen when there's no deer around.
right,
It's like, what's going on? And
right.
I remember one time I was out and there was a bunch of reeds and stuff and it sounded like this, all kinds of racket. I figured, okay, this is prime morning hunting time. Who is out there walking around on all the reeds up there? No, it was a big buck. It was about 100 yards away. I could tell it had a rack. I couldn't see it because it's too far away.
Right.
But as this deer was walking through making all kinds of racket. I was like, oh, okay. It's not somebody out there. It's what I want, but he's too far away.
Too far away. And you get to
Yeah.
know the sights and sounds of the woods, and you realize when it doesn't sound right, something's not right, something's off. And but like you said, experience is the best teacher, but hopefully the experience is kind. It's not something we can't get past, like a missed opportunity or something. But if you hurt somebody or hurt yourself, it's really taints the rest of your life. So
Yeah. And tree stand safety is a big issue.
sure.
And setting up your tree stands correctly, it can make a lot of difference. Putting your pegs in correctly, the right spacing.
Yep. Lifelines, I won't climb a tree anymore without my lifelines. I've had more trouble, on almost falls getting up and down versus in the tree.
Yeah,
That
that's where most of them are
yeah,
going to happen, is getting in or getting out of your tree stand.
yeah, you grab a step, your hand's cold, you don't quite, so yeah, my lifelines are my kind of my one of my top, if not my top pieces of equipment that I use in all my stands. So
Well, and then we had some tree stands up at this farm we was hunting, and then when we had to pull them down, we're unscrewing the pegs out of there, and one of my pegs that I was screwing out of there broke.
oh yeah,
It
yeah.
was be-
Oh yeah.
and it was in there, and it's like, well, that wasn't in there very good.
Yeah, no, that happens. It's never happened to me pulling it out, but as I'm looking at this is back. I haven't used those screw-in steps for years, but gosh, back in the day, I didn't. A lot of close calls that thankfully didn't cost me, but ignorance is bliss, as I say, until it's not. So,
Yeah.
in any case, yeah, lifelines and safety are right up there with shot placement and making sure of your target. So,
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast just on proper setup of tree stands.
oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? Spend a whole day talking about it. Yeah, but it's so
Yeah.
important, so important.
And there's all kinds of aspects on there and that we can talk about, and it's just so much fun talking about all this stuff, and kind of gets me excited. It's okay, I want to go try that.
Yeah, it'll be here, fall will be here before you know it. So,
Yeah, I
but
can get my bows all set up for that. I've
I
got
know.
I've
Yeah,
got three bows. I got one bow when I worked at Cabela's. We in the archery department, John and I, we'd get, the manager would have all the returns, big old pallets full. These boxes were probably about 4 foot square, or
hmm
a little bit bigger. And they would come in and we'd pull all these bows out that returned for one reason or another.
hmm
Some had bad springs, some had all kinds of different stuff that was bad. And we'd pull them out, and it's okay, we've got three bows, the same bow. Okay, we can make a good one out of this. So we'd make a good one out of it and put it in our used bow rack, and then sell them. So we're constantly going through theirs. And I was able to get a couple of bows. I forget what the first one was, like $150. And then I got a bear in the snow camo. It listed for $900 is what it was, just for the plain bow. And I got it for, I forget what it was now, 150, $200, something like that.
hmm
But it needed a new string. No big deal. I could probably make a string every month and not run out of material in my lifetime. Yeah, because I
Right.
used to make strings, so I had all the different colors. I got a dozen different colors in 8125, which is what I use for compounds, as well
hmm
as the B50 used for recurves. So I have so much string material. So that was no big deal. So I made the strings for it, and the string stop was messed up, so I fixed that, and I got all that fixed, and I haven't ever set it up, but I've got two other PCs that I shoot. One PSC Carrera that I got in 2001 when I become a dealer. And that one, believe it or not, was rated at 320 feet per second, is what that bow was rated at.
Wow.
And that was in 2001.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a long time ago to
Yeah.
to have that kind of speed, but
I don't shoot that kind of speed because I have a kisser button on it. I have a peep in it, which slows it down. I use a loop, I got
yeah.
a string loop on there. I put the string leeches on the string top and bottom, and as well as the control cable and the bus cable. I put them on.
Hmm.
If I take a string, I can pluck it and it rings. I put one of those dampeners in it, and then you have a little thud. I actually did a video on that one. I kind of plugged it. Here's what it sounds like, and then I put one in, and here's what it sounds like. You could hear it, a dampening, and that all slows it down, but it also decreases the vibration.
Right.
And so and then I can't remember if that one also put the limb savers on the limbs themselves too. I don't remember now, but that all that slows it down, but it quiets the bow up.
Right.
And the quieter the bow, the less you're going to spook the animals.
Right. That's true. No,
And
quiet.
I was shooting one deer off to my right. I've told this story a couple of times, but I was shooting a deer off my right, and I hear another deer coming off to my left. So I shoot that deer, watch where it runs off to, turn around, load an arrow, come to full draw, wait for the other one to come into the clearing and shoot another one. You can't do that with a loud bow. Deer didn't
Yeah.
even know it was there.
Right.
I shot,
Uh,
didn't even know.
yeah. No, that's true. I mean, that whitetail I shot this year, that buck, after the release of the arrow and it ran off, the two deer that had come in before were still sitting there. They kind of looked up for a moment and went back to, scrounging around for acorns before they departed. So yeah, if you got a quiet bow, I mean, it's certainly a quiet game, and it's amazing what you get away with. That's the beauty of archery. It's such a silent sport. So
Yeah, and that's the ones that want to have speed, faster, 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 lighter
yeah,
arrows. It's a crack going off.
yeah, it
So
is.
they're going to
And,
hear that crack and they're going to what? And
yeah,
they'll just run off.
my buddy, you know, uh, sometimes I've seen different guys shoot. He was telling me he was watching some guys shoot crossbows and how how pop that loud that is,
Right.
and but whether it's a recurve or a well-tuned compound, it's so quiet, it's like, real subtle thump. And that's one of the things I love about it too. It's such a quiet endeavor, so yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a nice quiet sport, and that's where you can get in there and not disturbing the whole area. You actually probably disturbing it more by walking in and out.
I know. Oh, for sure. Your
Yeah.
scent and everything. No, no doubt. No doubt. No doubt.
And sometimes they don't get spooked walking in. There was one time I was walking into my tree stand, and I just use a little mini mag light, so it's not really bright. I don't use a big old floodlight. It's just enough light to see so I don't run into stuff. And I'm walking in, and I hear this deer get up, so I hurry up and cover up my flashlight, and then turn it off, and I just stand there for a while. And I didn't hear it run very far. I think it just got up and run a few feet. So now, because there was a nice moon out, I could see the rest of the way into my tree stand. I'm in
Hmm.
my tree stand, and that deer walks by my tree stand before shooting time. I didn't spook it up because I didn't come with bright
Right.
light, and I just froze. And then I just kind of, I take a step and stop, just kind of scurry like a squirrel,
Sure.
And I was reading a story about this guy. He said he was old, don't see very well, don't hear very well, and he'd take a couple steps and he'd stop and look and listen. A couple steps, stop and look, and he wouldn't try and be quiet. He'd make noise. What's a squirrel sound like when it's on the grass and leaves?
Right.
Scurry and stop,
Yeah,
scurry and stop.
for
So you
sure.
could take that. The deer don't know the difference.
Right. No, no, it's true. Trying to mimic different sounds can get you into your stand a little easier. It's worked for me a few times too, no doubt. No doubt. That's a good strategy to use, especially if it's really loud and, cold and clear and the leaves are, less than quiet. So,
Or now, as we're out walking, the snow is crunching.
oh,
Every
yeah,
step,
no,
crunch, 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 crunch.
yeah, there's no way to hide from that. That's for sure. That's
No,
for sure.
yeah, well, you've had those sounds of the snow that
Oh yeah.
people down
Oh yeah.
south don't realize that when it gets cold enough, every step makes a crunching sound on the snow.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt.
Us
No
up in the
doubt.
north, we've experienced that many times. Now,
For
if it's
sure.
warmer, you can walk in that snow and you don't make much noise.
Yeah, it's definitely there's no hiding now. I mean, it's
Yeah, you're not hiding from anybody now. There's no way to scurry and sound like a squirrel or a rabbit or
that's right.
anything
That's
else.
right. That's right.
Yeah, that's oh, we've been talking quite a while, almost 2 hours
Yeah,
now.
I was gonna say,
All kinds of good stories here.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me though, so thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and anybody that has any questions, just get a hold of us. Join the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group if you haven't, because we have a lot of experience in there. Anywhere from archers that are still just teenagers to archers that are been shooting for 60, 70 years, and everything in between. We've got, if you have a question, ask, because we have somebody there that can answer most all of your questions, one way or another. And just get a hold of myself or anybody in the group, and you have problems, let us know. We'd gladly help.
No, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a really enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you, and we'll talk to you another time, and we'll have a lot of fun again.
All right, you
We'll
take
have to
care,
hear
man.
more. But next time we'll have to hear more hunting stories.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Hey, you take
Wait,
care. You take
yeah,
care.
you too. We'll talk to you later.
All
My name
right.
is
Bye
Rick
bye.
Canterbury. I've been your host today on Arch Truck 101, and we will see you on the next one.